Welcome back to the SBK Betting Podcast, a grand national special. The 4 mile, 2 furlong showpiece is back, and we have the world famous national obstacles to look forward to. We've got the direct declarations, and we'll go through all our selections on this podcast. And I'm delighted to say that we have Ross Millar, the king of the staying chasers this podcast season, Ross, so no pressure at all. And we look forward to hearing what your selections are a little bit later on. I'm afraid to say that we have no Tom Collins. We've lost him to illness, and James Millman is on Racing TV duties. So we have drafted in an exceptional substitute in the 2022 Racing TV Tipstar winner, Dan Overall. The same tipping competition, coincidentally, won by Ross in 2020. So we are always striving for the best on this podcast. No pressure, Dan. Just got the national to solve on your SBK debut. So thanks for joining us. Well, as I said, brilliant to have you on board. We're going to cover 3 races on this podcast, one less than normal, so that we can go through the standout race, give the Grand National a proper deep dive. But we will start with the 225 on Saturday, the Mersey Novices Hurdle, run over 2 mile, 4 furlongs. A good feel to this race. We've got some horses coming in from Cheltenham, including 3 Stripe Life, who's the current SBK favourite 5-2. Walking on Air, who missed Cheltenham, is 3-1. LS Bell is 11-2. Stage Star, who pulled up at Cheltenham, is 7-1. And Good Risk at All opts for this race instead of a handicap. He is 7-1. So who is going to be the best TC impersonator, and tell me how many horses who ran at Cheltenham over the years have won this race? Ross Millar, I'm going to throw that over to you.
Wouldn't have a clue, Jess. I'm sure the current winner of Tipstar is bound to have that, the tips of his fingers. But I mean, let's wish TC that he gets better, though slightly suspicious. Birthday week, Aintree Festival. Sounds a bit like the bug I used to get during the Cheltenham Festival when I was at school, but there we are. This race, 3 Stripe Life, you can see why he's favourite. He's been second best now behind Sir Gerhard twice at the Dublin Racing Festival and then at Cheltenham in the Ballymore. But Gordon Elliott is 1 from 79. There can be no doubting they're not in good form. He had an odds-on shot beat last week. I don't need much reason to overlook a favourite, so I'll happily pass him by. But if they're back to form, he's the most likely winner. Walking on Air is really interesting, very unexposed, perhaps lacks a bit of experience for this, but you couldn't help but be taken by how he won last time. That was over 2 miles, steps up to 2.5. The Dam Refinement was a very good hurdler for these owners. Over 3 miles, actually won the handicap hurdle at this track, at this meeting many years ago. So I think he's got bags of potential. I like the fact that he's missed Cheltenham. He will arrive here fresh. This has been the target. I do like that in a horse, but he does lack experience. Good Risk at All. I'm absolutely distraught that he's missed a handicap.
Crazy choice.
I think he can step up to this. I think he's a very good horse, but he has got to step up. His jumping is going to have to pass this test. Sam Twiston-Davies on instead of Charlie Deutsch. I've sort of voiced my opinion that I think Charlie Deutsch suits this horse better. Stage Star, again, we certainly didn't see the best of him at Cheltenham. Flat track might suit better. Colonel Mustard could improve up in trip. But the one at the bigger price that I would take along with Walking on Air is Nell Sun. Strictly speaking, North Lodge is weighted to reverse that Calso form. North Lodge was giving him £5 last time, was only beaten half a length. But Nell Sun definitely stayed on the best over that trip of 2 mile, 2 furlong. Extra 2 furlongs I could see suiting. And it's got some quite nice form, again, staying on at Haydock behind John Bon in a race that perhaps got knocked at the time, but perhaps in hindsight wasn't a bad performance by John Bon. He was clear second best behind Constitution Hill last time. So again, I think Nelson will probably have been aimed at this as his end of season target. 16-1 is a big price for an unexposed horse from a really smart trainer. Doesn't have the horses he should have in Nicky Richards. So at 16-1, I'd take him along with Walking on Air.
Okay, so Ross has opted for 2 horses that did miss Cheltenham, possibly on purpose. We know Walking on Air got a little bit of a setback, which meant that he couldn't go to the Ballymore. So he is fresh, but as Ross quite rightly says, is fairly unexposed. So we don't know what the limits are to him. We possibly know the limits of Three Stripe Life. He's just bumped into Sir Gerhard on multiple occasions, and he's been a bit of a bridesmaid this season, but an honourable horse nonetheless. I will give you the stat. What I found is 7 of the last 10 winners did run at Cheltenham. Now, plenty, there aren't actually that many who come into this race with that Cheltenham run under their belts. Colonel Mustard ran a very good race in the County Hurdle, but this is a big step up. And Stage Star, the Grade 1 winner, pulled up. Dan, introduce you to the podcast and get your thoughts on this. It's an intriguing little event. I think what Ross has mentioned about Gordon Elliott's form is really crucial. It can be for the rest of the day and for the rest of this meeting as well. What did you make of it, and how have you figured out your final selection?
And just a note on those Cheltenham stats as well. I think it's 14 of the last 22 as well, if we want to go back a bit further. So generally they do run at Cheltenham. But as you say, there are plenty in here who avoided Cheltenham, and I think it may prove beneficial here. To be honest, when I looked at this at the 5-day stage, I thought this would cut up a fair bit. Like, I actually backed LA Bell anti-post, thinking a few of these wouldn't go. Good Risk at All being one of them. I thought he'd be sure to go in a handicap. Three Stripe Life I wasn't sure about either. Look, he's been very respectable this season. 3-time Grade 1 runner-up. Last time in the Ballymore, very fair effort. I'd just be slightly cautious of Elliott's form for one, and also anything that ran on that Wednesday at Cheltenham. I know it was the first race, but they got some horrendous conditions that day. And just on the way they finished that race, obviously Journey With Me took that really heavy fall that thankfully he got up from, and they crawled up the line there. I just wonder if that's taken a bit out of him. So with that in mind, I am going to side of LA Bell, who's coming here as a fresh horse. And she's already finished ahead of Three Stripe Life, albeit it was in last season's champion bumper. Now, she was kept back from the mare's novice for this race. And given how that race was run, it was really slowly run, which is quite unusual. I think that's going to prove quite beneficial here, especially considering she seems to need 2.5 miles. If you look back at some of her form now, her emphatic defeat of a horse with no name, who was second in that mare's novice, looks really, really strong. The third from that race, one of the next 2 starts, is now rated 137. It was a slowly run race behind John Bon. I think you can completely forgive that effort. It didn't suit her being held up over 2 miles. And it was a similar story in Sydney Banks as well. Well, I think she did remarkably well to win there. Again, no pace at all, held up, only getting £2 from the boys there instead of the usual 7 as well. And she beat Gentleman at Arms, who was second in the Leamington before. He's a proper staying type. So to reel him in, given that he had an easy lead and an easy time out in front, I think was a very, very fair accomplishment. Harbour Lake, who was beaten, I think, in 4th when he was brought down. He won Cosley off 126 the other day in a handicap. So the form of that race looks fairly solid. And Dan Skelton won this race last year with My Drogo. And I think these other 3 runners in previous renewals have all placed. It's clearly a race he targets and he does quite well in. Out of the 6 mares to run in this race in the past 13 years, 4 of them are placed. So they can do quite well in here. Look, she might be vulnerable to one a bit too good, but we know she's pretty damn good from her bumper days. I think over this kind of trip in a big field as well, I think it's going to help her play to her strengths over 2.5 miles. I think she's a live shout, and maybe she might drift slightly because the field is quite strong, but I think she's going to be bang there at the finish.
Okay, really comprehensive and interesting analysis on LA Bell's chances, and reading the post-race comments after the Sydney Banks, you could tell Dan Skelton was eager to go for Aintree. He'd obviously had the other options, which is mares only events, but they believe that the track, if anything, is what will bring out the best of her. So 11-2 for LA Bell as it stands. For Dan, Walking on Air for Ross, which I do agree with. I just don't know what the limits are of him. And I think he comes with quite a nice reputation and is exceptionally fresh for this race at 3-1. And looking back through the years as well, the English have had a very, very good record in this race. And I'd like to see him run a good one for the Nicky Henderson team. Okay, so that's the Mersey Novices Hurdle. We'll head into the Liverpool Hurdle over 3 mile, half a furlong. The dual stairs hurdle hero, Flooring Porter. out to give the Flooring Porter Syndicate another memorable day. He's 5-4 favourite, and I'm surprised he's not shorted, to be honest. He just needs to beat horses he's already beaten, including Champ and Time Hill, who are both 11-4. And it's really, Ross, whether Danny Mullins, who was a tactical genius the day at Cheltenham, can he control the race again at a track like Aintree, or will the jockeys, knowing what he does and how he does it, will the jockeys try and work out how to beat him at his own game?
Well, I don't think anything that can beat him really wants to go and upset him, because I think they all rode how they wanted to ride last time. I mean, Danny Mullins is tactical genius most times you watch him ride, to be fair. King George, he's as good as there is. The only horse in the field that could perhaps upset the apple cart, so to speak, is Ashdale Bob. He could go forward. He's quite free. Now, if he upsets Flooring Porter, who is perhaps a bit mentally fragile, then potentially that doesn't suit. But Danny Mullins appears to be confident that he can, just drop him behind and settle him, and he hasn't got to make the running. So I think Flooring Porter is the most likely winner. I don't really want to go in backing him at a short price, because the only thing I'd point out is from turning in to the last hurdle is a very wide, open expanse of racecourse that isn't railed on the inside. Now, Flooring Porter does hang. He does like to run around a bit. They definitely pointed to the lack of railing at Punchestown as being as much of an issue for him as going right-handed when he was beaten after Cheltenham last year. If that issue rears its head, then that's potentially a problem. But I would contradict that by saying he has looked far, far more sensible this year. So I think he's the most likely winner. I probably won't have a bet. If I were to have a little stab at it, I might chance Kashari at 20-1. He was 7th in the stayers, but I think of all of those that were close up, and he was close up in 7th, he would have been the least suited by the tactical affair. He just travelled into it very nicely and just looked a bit tap for toe coming down the hill. It could be that Cheltenham's not his track. He had one try there previously in the handicap and was very well beaten. And then ran a really nice race at Aintree in a handicap at the start of the year off a top weight, beat chasers, but quite well rated chasers, having a run over hurdles. I thought that was quite a nice bit of form. If Aintree is more his track and Ashdale Bob helps to force a slightly stronger pace, I think he could perhaps get close to Flooring Porter, though I can't see him beating him. And I just see no reason why Tyne Hill or Champ will get any closer. So for me, Kashari, fairly speculative, but that's the way I'd be looking at it.
Okay, Kashari is 20-1 in a race where you can get each way places. Flooring, I think it's an excellent point about Ashdale Bob. He likes to lead, but we thought that Classical Dream liked to lead. He didn't get it. It's clearly about the start, what they do. But as you said, Danny Mullins doesn't seem to panic at all. He just suits his horse so well. I thought it was interesting. Gavin Cromwell talked about that. The reason why he tends to hang, he's quite an intelligent horse. He was looking to go round again at Cheltenham, and Danny Mullins was very good just to keep him concentrated. But it is a completely different track, Dan, that he's got to undertake. I think it could be actually just that slightly bit easier for him, if anything. I just can't really see anything in here that is good enough to properly frighten him. And they tried to do it. Time Hill last time. He is last year's winner, but I just don't think he's ultimately good enough. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you guys have made a lot of the points I would have covered. Ashdale Bob's inclusion, I think, is good for the race. I mean, last time when nothing challenged him in the Stayers Hurdle, I was just bemoaning it slightly because for as much as Danny Mullins, it was a great ride by him, that race was fairly over once he had such an easy time and once he was able to dictate. You can't give such a tactically dependent horse and a jockey of that quality that kind of rope. And again, I think Ross made the point of what's in here that has the possibility to really beat him is going to want to challenge him for the lead. And there isn't really anything. The one horse I would have loved to have seen in here, because I think it might have upset the apple cart a bit more, especially with the other connections horses, is Sporting John. Given that he's JP owned, obviously they've got Champ as well. He's with Philip Hobbs, they've got Time Hill, and I think they've always thought he's superior to him. I thought he would have been the one to really make this an interesting race. Ashdale Bob might challenge him, but he had a hard race in that Coral Cup, and I'm not sure he's good enough to really perturb him for too long. Molly Ollie's Wishes has gone forward in the past, but I think she hasn't beaten a horse when she's raced against the boys this season, and probably just isn't up to this standard. So, I mean, I was trying to take on Flooring Porter in the stayers at Cheltenham based, I thought it might get a bit of a battle up front with Classical Dream, but here I'm struggling to see what will challenge him and make it difficult. I think Stayers Hurdle winners are 5 from 6 when trying the double at Aintree. None have actually tried since Thistlecrack in 2016, but I find it very hard to look past Flooring Porter here. I know maybe Aintree is not the easiest track to make all over hurdles, but I just struggle to see how Time Hill and Champ will reverse that form, like you mentioned, Jess.
Yeah, I'm just looking through maybe a change. Maybe this is the whole point, that Connections will look at their horses and think, right, it's time that we do change tactics. We don't look like horses that would do, but we've got to give it a go. And the likes of Thomas Darby, Aidan Coleman, they might just say, let's try and do what Classical Dream did to Flooring Porter at Leopardstown over Christmas, and that's the way you beat him. But I can't see anything good enough. I agree with you, Dan. Flooring Porter for me, I think they don't need to come here, but I think they think that this horse is good enough to win this race and just provide the owners a fantastic day out. They've got a serious animal. So that's the Liverpool Hurdle. As I said, Koshari for Ross, Flooring Porter for Dan, and myself. We'll head into the big one, and we want to spend a good bit of time on the Grand National, as it deserves. It takes place at 5:15 on Saturday, run over 4 mile, 2 furlongs. SBK playing 6 places. It is always a lottery, but nowadays you do need that bit of class. It's not so grueling and stamina laden as it once was. And you need a bit of luck too. Who will take to these fences? Who will outstay their rivals? We've had a bit of drama this morning in the fact that we've got last minute horses that have now got in thanks to others being non-declared. So Claire Surf and Fortitude getting the run. Claire Surf's price has just crashed. Obviously, doesn't take a genius to work out. His form has worked out well with Win My Wings. But I wanted to touch on the lead protagonists. So we've got Delta Work, Any Second Now, and Snow Leopardess, 8-1 joint favourites. Respect for them all, but much too short for a national. Before we get into everyone's selections, Ross, I'd like just to get your thoughts on these three, because everyone will be looking at the Grand National and thinking, they're 8-1 joint favourites for a reason. Can you get behind any of these at the top end of the market?
In a word, no, Jess. There's a lot spoken now that it's just a regular handicap. It's not the jumping test that it used to be. And that's probably true. It's not as severe a jumping test as it used to be, but it's still the most severe jumping test in Britain and Ireland. If you went into the weighing room and asked a jockey, would they rather ride a novice chaser around the Mildmay course or the national fences, 100% of them would say the Mildmay course. It takes a bit of jumping. Delta Work was an impressive winner of the cross country at Cheltenham for what sort of race that was. But people seem to forget he's a very clumsy jumper of a fence in general. He would have won a lot more races in his career if he could jump consistently, and he can't. So I wouldn't fancy him at any price really, but certainly not at the price he is. And the same goes for a Claire Surf. He can absolutely wallop one. Tom Bellamy, I think, has done a piece with SBK, so saying that he lacks concentration at times. Well, there's nothing like 39 other horses galloping around you to sort of maybe distract you. So that would worry me. And then the mare, you'd love to see her win it. I mean, what a great story that would be. But I just have my stamina doubts with her. She looked very tired at the end of the Beecher. Now, yes, she got to the front a long way out and was perhaps idling. She was tired. She's got more weight again. I'm not into stats, so the fact she's a mare, the fact she's great, she doesn't know that and she doesn't care about that. But I just think she's a short enough price, and is probably a price that's been compacted a little bit by the story. But I will give you one stat that I think might be pertinent to this race. All of the handicap chases at the Cheltenham Festival were won by British trained horses. And in the 3 mile chases, the Kim Muir and the Ultima, Britain had the first 3 home. Now that is as a direct consequence of what the handicapper has tried to do in sort of levelling the playing field. That's relevant to this race because he would have applied the same logic to the Irish horses here. So there's a lot of Irish horses at the front of the market. A lot of people saying that the Irish will have the first 10 home, etc., etc. I just wouldn't be so sure.
That is very interesting. I'm just looking at the first 10 at least weighted, and all of them bar 1, 2, and that's Easy's Land and Lost in Translation, are English trained. So, the majority of those at the top of the handicap are Irish trained, and it is a really fair point. They have, they've dominated this race over the last few years. And I thought it was worth weighing, saying that 2 of the last 11 favourites, joint favourites, have won. 2 of the last 11. And horses in the top of the market, yes, we've seen Tiger Roll, yes, and Manila Times last year was well supported before the off, but historically we've looked back and we found, and there is value, and there are classy horses that come into this that are further down the pecking order. I thought it was important to touch on the lead protagonists, and Dan, I get your thoughts as well, because they are those prices for the reasons, the reasons that they showed this season. Snow Leopardess, I thought perhaps her form wasn't as good. Maybe Any Second Now is worth mentioning, because he did run an exceptional race in this contest last year. He was hampered, and there is, again, if you're looking at records and trends, horses that have trying this race a second time, they can go well again. So he does come into this with experience in this, albeit he's now up in weight.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, he was my pick last year, and I was a bit heartbroken when he was hampered as he was, and he never really had a chance from there on out. And to finish as well as he did was quite remarkable, I thought. I will just say, I think his chance may have gone, though. Now a 10-year-old up £7. He's short enough now based on that. He's had a decent prep again this year, like over 3 miles this time as opposed to 2 miles as his prep race. But I think he's short enough just based on the age and the fact he's up in the weights. Looks, I think, like Ross said, Snow Leopardess, what an absolute star she's been. One of the stories of the season, without a doubt, regardless of what happens here result-wise. Like, she has been remarkable to watch and follow. But again, I just really wouldn't be interested in a bet at her at the prices. I think, as said in the Beacher, she was labouring close to home, and this is going to be another thorough examination of her, and maybe this is just one bridge too far. And like Ross said, again, with Delta work, I mean, people are forgetting that he didn't exactly used to excel in the jumping department. I know he's been rejuvenated by the cross-country fences, seemingly, but that isn't a cheat code to automatic national success like Tiger Roll was. I know people seeing the same silks, same kind of route, and think it must happen again. He's got the decent back class, but again, he's been well found in the market. And for all that I can see the case, again, the price just wouldn't be for me.
Okay, well, what I'm pleased to hear is that you guys are within my thinking that there is value to be still found in the Grand National, because over the last couple of years, I've got a little bit worried about this race that's disappearing. And Ross, king of value, we know that this year gone by. Where is it in this year's Grand National?
Well, I'll give you my 3, but I'll give you 2 that came close to the list and just missed out. Domain Deal, who I actually mentioned on a long gone previous podcast, that I'd shrewdly backed anti-post at 100 to 1. He's still available 100 to 1, so that's how shrewd that was. He's got in. As I've looked at it more closely, I just wonder that he could be getting a bit far back and come from too far back. But I think he's interesting. He stayed on very well over the beach, and I think this has been the target. Cloth Cap is another one that interested me. I've got a mare from his family, so I always follow him closely. He's £4 lower than last year. If the wind up has worked and the grim thought was just about getting him right, then he's perhaps the forgotten horse, but I've reluctantly passed him over. So the 3 I've come down on, Burrows Saint. I think he travelled too well last year, and I think Patrick Mullins, perhaps turning in, thought, I'm going to win the National, and maybe used up a bit too much petrol a bit too early. 2005, Hedge Hunter fell at the last when beaten and when tired in 3rd. I swiftly put a line through him for 2006 as a non-stayer, won't get home, and he absolutely hosed up. I can see a little bit of a parallel here with this horse. He's £1 lower, Paul Townend rides. You do have to forgive a very poor run last time, but that wouldn't worry me overly. He was pretty good behind Alban Photo the time before. 20 to 1 is probably skinny enough, given that you've got to forgive a few things, but I did think he was interesting. Kildesart for Ben Pauling, I think, has been aimed at this since coming back from injury. He's well handicapped off 147, have been second in the 2020 Ultima off 150. He's won on the Mildmay track previously, 3 mile handicap chase. I think 41 to 1 years with SBK is a decent price. And then the final one, you've always got to go with a sort of quirky sort for the national, and there is none more quirky than Dishaba. He has been a bit more consistent this year. You know, he ran badly in the Welsh National, but a lot of horses did. I think the ground there found a lot out, so I happily forgive that. He stays very well. Again, he's run some nice races at the track, notably over hurdles at the start of this season. 66 to 1, I could see him. He's either going to hate it or he'll love it. If he loves it, I think he's well weighted, nice big price. Be nice to see Trevor Hemming Silks in the winner's enclosure once again. And Philip Hobbs is a trainer that probably deserves that real big winner. So those are my 3 against the field.
We love that. Okay, 66-1 Dishaba and Tom O'Brien on board, Philip Hobbs. And I couldn't believe when I see he's just a 9-year-old, as is Boris Saint, just a 9-year-old, which is, again, good for the trends. We want you.
Well, you know me and the trends, Jess.
Yeah, exactly. You've been filling in for Tom. Okay, we've heard from Ross and his selections. Boris Saint, Kildesart, and Dishaba, and we wish you luck, Ross, after finding the Scottish national winner. Dan, we'll come to you now and get your thoughts on where the value might lie in this year's Grand National.
Yeah, so a couple for me. The first one, probably my main bit in the race, will be Longhouse Poet. Now, he landed a bit of a gamble to win the Fiestes. I think that the week before he was getting backed in all the time. And I think if you're on those fancy prices then, in truth, you were always happy that day. He always looked like the winner there. Admittedly, the winning margin wasn't massive in the end, but he was a shade comfortable there. And that didn't really come out of the blue if you look back through his form. He beat Monkfish in a bumper. He was third in a couple of Grade 1 novice hurdles. His novice chase campaign was pretty decent as well in context. I mean, he was second to Janadil over an inadequate trip, and he's proven to be a fair operator this season. And then he beat Run Wild Fred in the novice chase before injury ended his novice campaign. And he's had kind of an old school prep leading up to this. Obviously, he won the Fiestes, and then he was sent back over hurdles. And Connections did the exact same thing with number 6 Valverde, who won the National back in 2006, which I really like that angle coming into a National. And he's only an 8-year-old, a sound jumper. He's had 6 starts over fences, which wouldn't be masses of experience, but he's had that big handicap experience where I think is crucial. And he's unexposed enough to think there might be a bit left. I don't think his mark's exactly a gift, but I think he's definitely weighted to run well in this kind of a race. And his profile to me just stands out quite nicely as something I think can see thriving in this kind of environment, because he's a very sound jumper as well. And to back up what Ross said as well, the Kildesart hope lives on. I think that trying to aim for this race for 1 year, I think they've been aiming for the last 3 years, and it's been issue after issue with him, bless him. I think even in the virtual Grand National, I think he was done a bit dirty. I think he finished 15th in that. I think he should have won that hands down. But it's one of them where it's been the aim for a long time. Obviously, they've had their issues. Some of his back form in big handicaps is exceptional. Ross has already mentioned that second in the Ultimate in 2020 when Aintree was going to go it was the plan, but for well-documented reasons, it didn't. Then he had an injury issue after the Labrooks last season, and they finally got him here this time around. And I thought the reappearance race over 2.5, that was going to be a trip always on the short side, but he shaped really well, I thought. Out in rear, travelled quite nicely through the race, looked to take a bit of a blow, and then stayed on again quite powerfully, as you'd hope for this kind of a prep for this race. And that was pretty much bang on what I hoped to see. As I said, plenty of big handicap experience. He's off the same mark here as when he won at Aintree a few years ago on the Mildmay course. The cheek pieces are back on. They were left off last time out. He's a sound jumper. I don't think stamina is going to be an issue. I think this is the time for him. I think there's no reason why he shouldn't run a big race here. Like, he's a very decent jumper as well. He's not like exuberant, but you don't really need to be in this. Just need to be solid and accurate. And I think all things considered, he's got a lovely profile for the race.
Well, Kildesart. And would you believe it? That is exactly where I was looking as well. I believe that he has that bit of class. And, you know, this return run was really eye-catching. And that day he was ridden by James Bowen, who was really delighted by what he put up and what is essentially a trip far too short for him. What were your thoughts then, Dan, when you heard Daryl Jacob, who obviously had all the options with the Simon Muir and Isaac Swade horses, went for Good Boy Bobby as opposed to Kildesart?
I wasn't too concerned, really. I mean, it wasn't too much of an issue. I can see why he's probably gone with him, because he's probably had a more productive season this year. He's ridden him plenty of times in the past as well. I know he's ridden Kildesart as well, but more recently this season, he's ridden Good Boy Bobby, won to win at Weatherby, and then he was second to I Wright, I think, at Newcastle as well. So plenty of experience riding him recently. I think that's more the reason for the decision more than anything. I really wouldn't worry about the jockey booking for Kildesart at all.
Yeah, if anything, Ross, what are your thoughts? If anything, I think it's a positive. I think James Bowen is a brilliant jockey. Obviously, this is a big, this Daryl Jacob, he's got Grand National winning experience, but I just love the way James Bowen rides horses like this, how he jumps the fence, how he sees strides. And I think that I was just gutted last year. He was meant to ride Secret Reprieve and he didn't get in. And I think that he's also won over these Grand National fences with McTotty. He's a kind of jockey that you want on side when you find a horse like this.
Yeah, truthfully, I'm delighted Daryl Jacobs chose Good Boy Bobby, to be honest. I mean, James Bowen is an excellent rider, very good to the fences. I mean, he won the Welsh National when he was 14 years old or something, wasn't it? So, yeah, I mean, you forget he's still a really young lad. He's got bags of experience. Comes from a family that would be really steeped at horse people, not just jockeys. And I think you do need that round the national fences. So, yeah, I think he's a great booking. And I'm just delighted to hear I'm not sailing a lone boat as I often am.
Not at all. I don't actually know if we've had a three-way tie, especially with a national selection. So yeah, brilliant. I back up the guys. Look, Kildesart is a sound jumper. He's won around Aintree. He was a classy novice. He was fourth in a Grade 1 at Cheltenham as a novice, and I thought he'd be my price play. 41-1 looks like it seems like he's quite obvious. Everyone else hasn't found him yet. That price might go once you've heard this podcast. Yeah, Kildesart, as I said, I agree with. And I think that Dan, you made really good points about Longhouse Poet as well. He's going down that number 6 Vivaldi route. And again, he's just you're looking for these kind of classy animals, and he's been placed in 2 Grade 1 hurdles over 2.5 miles and is that sound jumper. And that's also what I believe Freewheeling Dylan is. And I think, look, this is a bit of a wild one because he's not actually completed a race this season. But at 50-1, well, he was 150-1 when he won the Irish National last April on ground, which be much more suitable to him then than it was when he pulled up at Ferryhouse in a hurdle. I wouldn't be too worried about that run. I think that the soft ground really found him out that day. The jockey reported to say that he was never really traveling, and that's probably a sign that he just wasn't overly comfortable in the ground. But he loves to jump, and he also, when he won the Irish National, he really was given a positive ride. And you've got to be pretty pacey. You've got to really enjoy attacking your fences in a national, which this horse has done. And I just thought he was just too big for an Irish national winner. So he's a good price as it stands as well. As I said, 50-1 with SBK, where you can get 6 places. Look, we can go through this race and pick out plenty of other names, and I just wondered before we end off our thoughts, Ross, come back to you to the point that we're making just briefly about some of the horses that sort of crept in, Fortescue being one of them. It'd be interesting for the Henry Daly team whether they even thought that this race was even going to materialize in the end. That horse has got fairly useful form. He's a horse that you'd imagine if they knew that he was going to definitely get her on, they'd prep them in. Do you imagine that they would be prepping, hoping that this would happen? How do you even work that out at this stage?
Yeah, I think you would have to go with that, wouldn't you? You'd have to hope for the best and prepare for it. And if you didn't get in, whichever poor lad or lass you like the least, you get them to go and do a racecourse gallop when it's mad fresh. He is interesting, and he's got form behind 5-Star Getaway, who runs in the Topham tomorrow. We think would have a great chance in that. If 5-Star Getaway goes close in the Topham, that's a nice little boost his form before the Saturday. He's a lively outsider from a trainer that's done really, really well this year, although things have slightly quietened in the last month for Henry Daly.
Yeah, and as you were saying earlier, I think it's a final point to remind, because we haven't actually picked out a Gordon Elliott runner. Is that the form of the yard, and perhaps that will be reflected on how this race pans out for him. We shall see. There's so much that you could pick out. The reason why this race has become so more tricky, is that these horses, they've all got genuine good class form behind them. Whether some of them are a bit long in the tooth, whether it's come too soon for them, we don't know. But the three of us do all like Kilterstart. That's all we can say. 41-1 as it stands. So let's see how that pans out for us. Longhouse Poet as well for Dan. Myself, I'd back that to 16-1. Borough Saint for Ross. We've also got who's at 20-1. A big price Deshabat at 66-1. And Kilterstart, as I said, 41-1. And then my big wild one, Free Will and Dylan, at 50-1. So I think we've done everything we can to give you our insight into the Grand National. But there's plenty of good racing in and around the races that we have previewed. So always a good opportunity if the guys want to throw out a nap or a next best outside of these. So Dan, I'll come to you for nap and next best selection.
So the nap will come in the bumper, and of course I know Ross is also a big fan of Henry II. I think he's 13-2 currently. I absolutely adore this fella. He was so keen and green on his debut, but he won in the manner of such a promising horse. Morgan Williams was having such a hard job keeping his mind on the task at hand. But once he got the hang of things, he just powered away in the manner of a very decent horse. Back that up at Ascot, again, looking raw, hanging left. So I think going back left-handed is only going to suit him. That form's been quite well franked by Top Dog and Authorised Speed, who've done well since. And Paul Nicholls has won this race with McFabulous and Napas Hill in the past 2 years. In fact, Napas Hill also won the same listed Ascot bumper as Henry II did. So there's precedent for coming here. This is the race Paul Nicholls tends to throw his best bumper horses at these days. He's not a massive fan of the champion bumper. And you see there's a couple that Willie is sending here, and I don't exactly think they're his A team. So at 13-2 at the minute for Henry II, I'd be bitterly disappointed if he isn't bang there at the finish. And whatever happens here, he's going to make a lovely hurdler and an even better chaser.
Okay, so nap selection, 13-2 for Henry II for Dan. And your next best?
Next best, I'll go LA Bell. I think this has been the plan for a while. The race is deeper than I would have hoped, but I can see it setting up quite nicely for her. And I'd be, again, disappointed if she isn't at least placing here.
Yeah, a really good case made for LA Bell earlier on in the pod from Dan. Okay, and to Ross for your nap and your next best.
So nap comes in the 4:15. It's a Saturday afternoon televised race, 3-mile handicap chase. You need the Welsh wizard Christian Williams on your side. Captain Ord ran an absolute cracker last time to win the Coral Trophy at Kempton. He's up £8, but I still think he's nicely handicapped. Kitty's Light gave a good look to the form when second last week in the Scottish National. And Captain Ord was placed last year off a higher mark. This is a mark of 149, was third in the Sky Bet chase at Doncaster. Christian Williams is in super form, does everything right. I'm certain this will have been the target from the second he crossed the line at Kempton in the Coral Trophy. And I expect him to go very close in a market that is made by Shamblu. He's a decent price. And then the next best, 145, 3-mile handicap hurdle. Again, I'm nothing if not predictable. But Don Levant remains well handicapped. This will suit him. 3 mile is the trip. Let's hope the ground doesn't get too desperate. Isabel Williams will weave her way through. He was second at this meeting last year, over 2.5 miles, beaten by a handicap blot. Nice long straight at Aintree will suit him well, and I expect him to be bang there at, again, another decent each way price. Okay,
Captain Ord 7-1, Don Levant 12-1. Yeah, a good point about the ground. Looks like it's good to soft. Everyone is having kittens about the ground and what the watering system is at the moment. Do not envy the position of the officials at Aintree, but I'd imagine it's going to be good to soft. It doesn't look like it's going to get much worse than that. Okay, for me, my nap is Flooring Porter. Can't see him get beat. 5-4, I think, is quite generous price really for this horse. And what's not to know? This is my next best. He's 22-1 for the Grade 3 handicap hurdle, run over 3.5 miles at 145. I thought he ran a brilliant race in the Potent to run 7th. He was 40-1 that day. I think I tipped him up. At the time, Mouse Morris's horses were really not running very well. He had had 2 winners all year, all season, in fact. Since then, he's been not running a huge amount of horses, but he's had winners, which is really crucial. He's actually had 3 winners. So he's had more winners over the last few weeks than he's had for all season. So I think those horses are in better form. And I think what's not to know has been one of them that's been running well despite the yard. So I think 22-1 is pretty generous for a horse who actually was dropped £1 for that run at Cheltenham. So that is my next best. We've gone through our Grand National selections. Hopefully we found some winners for you in there. As always, the SBK offer for new customers, they can get £30 in free bets by depositing £10. T's and C's do apply. So massive thanks to Dan for joining us today, to Ross as well. Best of luck to you all. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Remember to like, subscribe. We'll be back again. Sadly for Ross, it looks like we might be heading into more flat scenes over the next coming weeks, but we do have things like Punchestown, Ferry House. We have an Irish national probably to solve as well. So a lot to look forward to, but we hope that we've given you a little bit of good luck for this weekend.